This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. We also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 13th of October 2021 and I am Miss K.
I'm Twim.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are in the Daily Nation. Not an inch. Kenya rejects C verdict. In the Standard, MP's new plan to cut down powers of DP. In the Star, rise of poker king Justin Muturi. And in the People Daily, Kenya scoffs at maritime dispute ruling. A mixed bag there. Why don't you kick us off, Mrs. K, about this ruling of yesterday?
Yes, so yesterday the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, made a ruling on the Indian Ocean boundary dispute between Kenya and Somalia. A quick summary of what happened. In August 2014, Somalia sued Kenya at the ICJ, disputing the maritime boundary between both countries. Kindly note that the case was filed in spite of ongoing negotiations and a memorandum of understanding between the countries to negotiate the maritime boundary. So what was the issue? For Kenya, the boundary ran on what was called a parallel of the line of latitude. In simple terms, this meant that from where our border meets Somalia's, the boundary ran horizontal in a straight line into the Indian Ocean.
Yep.
For Somalia, the boundary ran on an equidistance line. This means that from where our border meets Somalia's, the line would slant diagonally. So yesterday, a 14-judge panel at the ICJ made a ruling and decided, like Solomon in the Bible, to cut the baby in two.
Yes.
The ICJ ruled that the maritime border between Kenya and Somalia went somewhere in the middle, what the court considered an equitable solution. We lost some territory, we kept some territory. And Kenya has refused to recognize the ICJ's jurisdiction and rejected the ruling in totality.
Yes.
And I say, viva la revolution. The ICJ is designed to look strong.
Yeah.
Its decisions are final and there is no right to appeal, but the ICJ is in fact weak. Many of its decisions have not been respected. It has no means to enforce its rulings, and
Yes.
experts have questioned the court's neutrality.
Yeah.
The
So
court-
this is like Maraga Part 2.
Maraga Part 2, exactly. The court has been accused of making decisions that set new precedents favoring the interests of the country from which the ICJ judge is a citizen and having far-reaching implications for other states.
Yeah.
And this is why the United Kingdom, the United States, Russia and China have all ignored orders of the court.
Here, here.
Hear, hear. So because the judges of the ICJ cannot be trusted to apply the law impartially, in March this year, Kenya withdrew from the ICJ case on account of procedural unfairness by the court, betrayal, and external interference. And we will reject yesterday's ruling on the basis of a principle we were taught by our very own Supreme Court. If the process is wrong, the product is also wrong.
Yes.
This was a lesson the Supreme Court taught us in 2017. And I think it applies to the ICJ process and ruling.
Here, here.
It applies, and you know, Mrs. K, I'm not even scared of this white maragas, but I'm actually thinking, why don't we annex Jubilant?
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
let's
yes,
just keep
yes,
going.
Yes, absolutely. Huh?
It was part of our property anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. Huh? Now, I have 3 observations to make as well on yesterday's ruling by the ICJ on the Kenya-Somalia maritime boundary dispute. Number 1 is an observation about Somalia. In our brief history of being a sovereign independent state, Somalia has never extended Kenya good neighborly relations. Successive Somali governments have consistently defied every agreement reached under international law. They never acknowledged the 1924 Anglo-Italian Treaty, which delineated the Kenya-Somalia boundary. They once again did not recognize the OAU General Assembly Resolution number 16, 1 of 1964, which stated that African states were to preserve their colonial boundaries. Hence why we had a shift of war between 63 and 67. Which takes me to my second observation. How do you deal with such a belligerent, cantankerous neighbor?
Yeah.
Observation number 2, therefore, and this is for the Kenya government. You do not recite poetry to a man brandishing a sword.
Bizarre.
Or to put it in the words of the former US Defense Secretary Ronald Rumsfeld, who was giving advice, actually, in this quote to future U.S. Secretaries of State, avoid a weak posture.
Yes.
Weakness invites provocation.
Yes.
Time and again, it has invited adventures that strength might well have deterred.
Yes.
Kenya had two options in confronting Somalia when they instituted proceedings against us at the ICJ in August of 2014.
Right.
We could have attempted to resolve this problem using diplomatic approaches or coercive approaches.
Yes.
But by going the diplomatic route, we were reciting poetry to a nation that is not and has never recognized international law. So, to our foreign affairs officials, heed the words of Donald Rumsfeld.
Yes.
Assume not a weak posture.
Yes.
To assert our sovereignty, what we therefore ought to do, and do as a matter of haste,
Yes.
as a matter of urgency, is to escalate our military and economic activities
Yes.
in the disputed territory.
Absolutely.
We need to install our own oil rigs there
Yes.
and commence offshore drilling,
Yes.
but also send out our patrol boats
Yes.
and so on to secure that territory
Absolutely.
before it's taken on by the Norwegians and all,
All
these
these external
yes,
interests.
all these external interests who are going to be financing
Absolutely.
these rogue governments of Somalia.
Absolutely.
Observation number 3,
Yeah.
and this is about the International Court of Justice.
Yes.
Lawfare has become another dimension of warfare.
Yes.
Lawfare has become another dimension of warfare.
Yes.
As the president said yesterday,
Yes.
in an unfortunate development over the last decade, and I'm quoting him here, a trend has emerged of some supposedly international organizations and countries, may I say, being deployed as political tools against African countries.
Yes.
The ICJ had neither jurisdiction nor competence to adjudicate this matter.
Yes.
Kenya and Somalia, as Ms. KU correctly said, we signed an MOU in 2009 that sought to resolve any disputes amicably and comprehensively through either negotiated agreements or through a joint commission. You know, but here is the ICJ trying to make space for itself and encroaching upon our sovereignty.
You know what?
Shame.
You know,
Shame,
JM.
shame.
By now, the PS or Foreign Affairs should have frozen the accounts of all those Somali official governments that have accounts in Nairobi. You do economic sanctions and even fly sanctions because you cannot continue to feed off a country that you're aggressing or you've been aggressing for all this time.
Yes.
Economic sanctions, hit them with that, and our soldiers should even cross the border and say, mutafanya nini? Anyway, today I'll not speak about much. I'll not speak about the ICJ and Farmajo. Today we will send a message of goodwill to Babaman. Greetings to you, Babaman. Professor Mutahi Ngunyi always tells us that the best way to predict the future is to create it. But he also tells us that you, Babaman, will have to work very hard to lose in 2022. Now, here at the Fort Hall School of Government, we think you can win 2022 in round 1. And the only way you can win round 1 is if you expand the executive and form a government of national unity. If you create the position of Prime Minister, 2 Deputy Prime Ministers and 2 Deputy Presidents, you will win by 70% plus 1. And creating these positions should not be hard. All you need to do is to have a draft constitutional amendment bill and pass it in one afternoon in Parliament. In any case, the judiciary told us the other day that if BBI was done through Parliament, they'd have no problem with it. Plus, just 5 months ago, you and President Uhuru rallied more than 2/3 of Parliament to pass BBI. It was a walk in the park. Now, if this is done, the time for referendum election will be ripe. We could hold the presidential election together with a referendum, and anyone against the government of national unity will be deemed to be an enemy of a united Kenya. In fact, a vote against the government of national unity will be a vote for one party rule, and none of us are ready to don yellow and green pajamas. And therefore, Bona Prime Minister, the time to create the future is now. Reggae never stopped. Reggae is still on.
Good one. Now, we've got to decide whom we're going to give the winning headline. We've got a 3-part criteria: topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking and thoughtful, or just plain lazy. I'm inclined towards the headline of the Daily Nation.
Could agree more.
Not an
Not
inch.
an inch. Kenya rejects sea verdict. I think that should give us our winning headline. And onto the political pieces we call cartoons in this country. Humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, and effective or just plain lazy. Please, Ms. K, tell us about the Daily Nation.
Daily Nation, we have a caricature of our president, Uhuru Kenyatta, and he's bending and pointing to a baby who has a head, oil blocks, and is sitting on Kenya, our map, and looking on is Somalia President Farmajo and a judge with a gavel for a head holding a scissor. I think this is like a Solomonic explanation. They're going to cut this baby called oil blocks.
I think that was a little bit lazy from him, because sometime back he had a cartoon of Farmajo and Uhuru riding on that, is it an oil tank?
I think that's
oil.
today.
Yeah.
That's today's cartoon for the star from his twin.
He just repeated that thing and put captions, that's it.
Okay, so a lazy one. I think we should toss that.
I think we toss it.
Let's look at the Standard.
The Standard, that is Gado, and the caricature there is President of Uganda, Kaguta Museveni, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and he's seeing a shrink. And in the frame, Museveni is saying, the first time I tried alcohol, it tasted so bitter. And he continues in the second frame and says, it nearly burnt my tongue. I don't know why people like it. And then the shrink asks him, and what happened the first time you tasted power? And then he said, Museveni retorts and he said, it tasted so sweet, I never wanted to let it go.
I really thought you were going to do that with like a Ugandan accent.
Well, I wish you reminded me.
Well,
A great cartoon, but I think Gado doesn't want to go to Kampala.
It's also a bit lazy. I think, what's the context?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't get the context.
No
as well.
context there.
I think we toss that too.
Absolutely. Both of them.
And let's move on to this is the Star. This is a caricature of President Uhuru Kenyatta and Somali President Farmajo. They're sitting on a double-sided oil drum in the middle of the Indian Ocean at the border between Kenya and Somalia. And President Kenyatta is saying to Farmajo, have you heard what we do with our court orders? And there's a gavel right above them. Yeah, well,
Cheeky.
yeah.
But,
Cheeky, pessimistic, but cheeky.
Cheeky, yeah?
cheeky.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think we toss
Toss
it.
it.
Okay, let's toss that.
All of them.
Yes. Toss all of them. So no winning cartoon. We've got a winning headline once again from the Daily Nation. I'd like to leave you with a quote. This is a quote on good neighborliness, since, as you know, we are here to live with Somalia until thine kingdom come. We can live without our friends, but not without our neighbors, right?
Yeah.
The saying goes. So this quote is a centuries-old saying popularized by the American poet Robert Frost, and I dedicate it to our ministers of defense and foreign affairs. And Robert Frost said, good fences make good neighbors. So build those fences,
Yes.
build those walls,
Yes.
on land, on the shores, in the waters, and even up in the air. Do what you must.
Yes.
Not an inch more,
Not an inch less.
less. Absolutely. Have a good evening and see you tomorrow.
Bless.